there's more than one title. I don't know why I thought this was What Every American Should Know. I'm sure I've seen that title before, but it definitely is not on the Atlantic article that's in our course reader. So those of you who've read all or part of this, what what's your impression? First impressions. Vivian?
Oh, I thought it was really interesting, especially with how he wanted to include like a vocabulary, like a common vocabulary.
Yeah, common reference, common vocabularies. Um, why was it interesting to you?
Oh, I just thought he brought up good points from, because he referenced another book, I think, with like a more outdated appendix. And I thought it was interesting how he thought it was outdated and he wanted us to all have a culture, like a common culture.
Yes. Other first impressions. I can't remember which of you have read all or part of it. So you'll probably want to jump in. Sophia, have you read part of this yet?
Yeah, I actually read the whole thing. I think my first impression, I was definitely like intrigued by the points he was making because a lot of them I'd never heard of before. I never even considered like trying to fight diversity by creating a list of common knowledge, especially how to even conquer that. And so I like that he was able to offer at least his perspective on it, and how he would conquer like such a big task.
Yeah, and a common, think about when you were in high school and you were reading um, literature and Shakespeare, or I don't know, even know literature anymore, but the fiction you would read, the authors would frequently reference current events, um, or they would reference Shakespeare, or they would reference the Bible, or they would reference beliefs in a faith. And if you weren't familiar with that allusion, you missed it. You didn't understand what they were talking about. Even as you watched the video last week, and I think it's Paul Taylor referenced the great melting pot. That's a phrase that you knew because of a common vocabulary. We're not even used to thinking about common vocabularies, and yet they're always there. For example, when I started mentioning Shakespeare, I could mention Frost, I could mention Roosevelt, I can mention World War II, and you have a frame of reference. You know what those things are. If I talk about Japanese internment camps, you have a frame of reference. You understand what that is. That's a common cultural vocabulary. And it allows us to talk back and forth. And so you're talking about one thing and I can understand you, or I'm talking about something and you can understand me. And that's the value of a common cultural vocabulary. We don't think about it because we just take some things for granted. I was some years ago, gosh, it's been a long time now, 2014, 2013, 2014, I went to the UK and I had trouble reading the street signs. They just were different. Yes, red meant stop. I could read the word stop, but there were a lot of other things too, like roundabouts and signs that made absolutely no sense. And I realized I don't share that common cultural vocabulary when it comes to street signs. And so we had to be on edge so we could figure it out, so we could translate it. And they were speaking English. Don't even get me started about what it's like to, like drive in another country. I encountered that. I wasn't driving, but I was riding in vehicles with people driving in Korea, and I couldn't even read the signs. So common vocabulary, common cultural vocabulary enables us to function in the culture that we live in. Somebody who doesn't know those things often has opportunities often has opportunities or understanding that can lead to opportunities cut off from them. So what appeals do you see, ethos, pathos, and logos? What appeals do you see Eric Liu making in here? One of you who's read at least all or part, where is he constructing ethos? Where is he appealing to pathos? Do you see any of that in here, or what rhetorical strategies is he using?
I didn't read the whole thing, but just from the part of it, I feel like he does have like the appeal of pathos a little bit, because he talks about something that's like really sentimental and emotional to people, which is culture and kind of inclusion and stuff. So I feel like constantly talking about that and speaking in a way of including everyone, he really appeals to that like pathos.
So pathos would be if he causes his audience to feel emotions. Can you think of a specific place where he might be building that sense, like an emotion?
I'd say maybe where he talks about kind of how like we're starting to evolve like that white supremacy feel and stuff. And I guess that's kind of a sense of relief, or just kind of, that's just people feel a lot more powerful because now they're turning the page to a better time, I guess.
Yeah, let me, I actually have, let's go to that section. I have a little bit of it right here. Liu claims that many of the culture wars can be interpreted as part of a noisy but inexorable end game, the end of white supremacy. This is on the second page of that article, if you're turning to that. And this really can evoke some emotions. As you're reading that right now, what do you think of when you think of white supremacy? What pops in your head when you hear the end of white supremacy?
Just kind of like the active sort of what you're seeing with like where Trump was elected. I mean, this is like a long-term thing. So even if we go back to like 2016, we can see that the election of Trump was very like reactionary to this ending of white supremacy. And that's like the first thing that pops into my head. Like a lot of the people who are supporting Trump are very emotional about their support for Trump, and they cannot pinpoint exactly why, but it's probably because of this noisy ending.
So it could indeed be, they could feel threatened as they read this. I think that it's important here to define what Liu means with white supremacy, because previously, probably when this was written in 2015, because it was initially published in 2015 in Democracy Journal. When people thought of white supremacy, they thought about the KKK or far right groups that wanted segregation or that didn't feel like Black people were as good as white people, or people of color were not as good as white people. And so that's what we used to think of when we thought of white supremacy. This really overt, whites are better than anybody else. But white supremacy is a lot more subtle than that. And so some of Lou's readers might be uncomfortable when Lou says this, especially when he says, and this is the sentence immediately after this quote, "From this vantage point, Americanness and whiteness are fittingly, achingly, but finally becoming delinked. And like it or not, over the course of this generation, Americans are all going to have to learn a new way to be American." And for some people reading this, that might be threatening. Their way of being, if they are white, may be interrupted. Jemar Tisby, who is a historian, he defined, there are many other good definitions of white supremacy, but this is the one I read this morning. I was just randomly reading a book called The Color of Compromise, and I came across this quote and I go, that's exactly what I need to include in today's lesson. It's like white supremacy is a concept that identifies white people and white culture as normal and superior. And superior is one thing, but when he says normal, then it forces us to rethink what's normal in our lives. Because this is where that embedded idea of systems comes in. And we're very used to in our English classes or our history classes learning about white people who do things. And that feels normal to us. But in reality, that's only one part of the story. There have been many, many great writers who were not white. We just don't read as much about them. And in fact, Lou describes over on the next page after this discussion of white supremacy, he describes how American novelist Saul Bellow critiqued multiculturalism in the classroom by asking mockingly who the Tolstoy of the Zulus was, or the Proust of the Papuans. And what he's actually saying is these white writers are better than the storytellers of the Zulus or the Papuans. And some people who love what they've known for a long time, as Eric pointed out, can be offended. But other people might have a different emotional response. What might be a different emotional response? Anybody? Rebecca? Jenny?
Hello. Okay.
Hello.
Okay. My mic wasn't working. So another reaction that people might have to the end of white supremacy, they might feel freedom and peacefulness.
Yeah, so it's some people might be threatened, but some people might feel freedom, peacefulness, a sense of relief. It's about time, valued. And I think that that's what Lou is trying to get at, is America is changing. America's population is changing. And it's time for American culture to also change. And the people who say it should stay the way it always has been, which is largely white, they may not be happy, but this is really important. In order to value all people, in order to create equality in the United States. So the context, I just made the PowerPoint go away. So all I wanted to move is this picture, and the context in which this was written, it was initially written in 2015, and then it was republished in The Atlantic in 2016. Nope, July 2015, same time. What's going on in 2015? In July 2015 or fall 2015? What's happening? By the way, I will be calling on people, so be prepared to unmute yourselves and participate. Let's see, what's going on 2015? I know you were so young then, but think back. What you know.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Let me see. I don't really know if I'm being honest, but 2015.
Who was president? Let's start there.
Wait, I think I might know. Was it when Barack Obama legalized same-sex marriage? Or no? I mean, I think that was one of the things that happened.
You know, it might have been. Can somebody do a Google search and see when actually the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage? Marriage equality happened then. Does somebody know? Can somebody do a Google search?
Yeah, that happened on June 26, 2015.
Okay, so yeah, definitely. So Obama's president, we have marriage equality coming into play. What else is happening?
I know that a lot of people, I guess especially on the right side, were getting really tired of Obama's presidency. So there was kind of like the big uprising and people who are pushing to vote in the 2016 election and get a different president.
Yeah, this is about the time the primary season kicked in, especially for the Democrats. It was almost a given that Hillary Clinton was going to be the candidate, even this early. Bernie ran, and somebody else I don't actually remember, and Hillary Clinton, but it almost was a given. But by July, oh gosh, there must have been about 15 Republicans running for president. By the fall, it was even more than that. Yeah, it was way more than that. So there's all this controversy, and people are moving further and further to the right to become president. And so that kind of feeds into this idea of culture wars, and which is why I wanted you to think about culture wars. What are culture wars? Sienna, do you know what culture wars are?
I don't. I'm sorry.
That is okay. It's okay to not know something. Matthias, do you know what culture wars are?
I'll try to guess. I don't know like the exact definition, but I would believe that it's probably some type of like conflict between like different groups or different social beliefs and stuff like that. Because I know in 2015, I remember that was kind of like the birth of like the new Black Lives Matter movement because there was like a really long run of police brutality and like African Americans getting shot by the police. So I would believe that it's most likely a conflict between two different groups or several groups and their beliefs and values.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, Matthias. And that's what Lou describes in his first sentence. He says, is the culture war over? And then he responds, he says, that is an absurd question. This is an age, and he starts describing the context. This is an age when Confederate monuments still stand, when white privilege denialism is surging on social media, when legislators and educators in Arizona and Texas propose banning ethnic studies in public schools. This is when Arizona passed a law that banned ethnic studies program. There was an amazing program in Tucson, and it was made illegal. It was increasing graduation rates of Latinx students in the high schools exponentially, and the program got canceled. And but people were afraid of it, and they assigned textbooks euphemizing the slave trade. Yes, calling them immigrants to the United States. When fear of Hispanic and Asian immigrants remains strong enough to prevent immigration reform in Congress, when the simple assertion that Black Lives Matter cannot be accepted by all, but is instead contested petulantly by many non-Blacks as divisive, even discriminatory. These are all the things that are happening in 2015. How is this different or the same than what's happening right now? I'm going to go ahead and I don't want to do groups right now because I want to have enough time to talk about the prompt. So you share. Eliza, that's what's happening in 2015. What's happening now that's similar?
Well, the Black Lives Matter movement is like pretty similar to the racial tension you're talking about in 2015. And again, the presidential race coming up is also very similar to this time. And it seems like a lot of the same problems are kind of continuing and coming back around for right now.
Yeah, Javi?
Yeah, I was going to say back in 2015, I think I put this in the chat. That was around the same time that Trump announced his run for presidency. So I can see that tension, happening in 2015. And now with him being president, we know what has happened, and we know actions that have happened from his supporters towards different minority groups. And basically there's a similar tension, if not more, that exists based on what we already know.
Yeah, it's the culture wars are not over. 5 years after this was written, it seems more intense than ever. I can tell you some Confederate statues have gone down. But beyond that, I don't know if anything's changed. Except, well, I don't know if things have changed. And then Lou adds, and that's only looking at race, add gender, guns, gays, and God to the mix, and the culture war seems to be raging along quite nicely. And that's why he says much of this angst can be interpreted as part of a noisy but inexorable endgame, the end of white supremacy. And he says, imagine this is true, that the decades-long war is about to give way to something else. And of course, he's hoping that for 2015, and we hope that for 2020. The question then arises, what? What is the story of us when us is no longer by default white? What is the story of America, of American literature, American history, American narratives are only representing, they cease to only represent white perspectives? And he answers, the answer, of course, will depend on how aware Americans are of what they are, of what their culture already and always has been. And that awareness demands a new kind of mirror. And that's what this is about. It's like, what's the mirror? Who are we? What is us? What does it mean to be an American? And I think that that's definitely the question that we started out with. That's definitely the question that we started out with this semester. And it's the question that we're continuing as we go into this next essay. I'm going to stop share, and then I'm going to go in. Yeah, what I needed to do is go here. Sorry about this. Always very bad if I can't access things. And this isn't even what I want. My apologies. I thought I had it lined up and I switched to another window. Let me pull up our prompt because I want to talk about this and I want to introduce it to you. And like nothing's changed. We're still talking about the same things, but we're going to talk about them from a different vantage point. And it's important that we start thinking about the research that we're going to need to do. Oh, here we go. This is the prompt, and you can access a PDF that has all these things. And but I've divided, since we have basics and background information, group work, essay structure, and the types of sources you can use. I put those into different tabs so you can access them easily on Canvas. This is our departmental project. This is what we're doing and we're required to do with the university. And that is use a group of texts to join an ongoing public discussion and identifying the context within which that discussion takes place: historical, social, intellectual, generic, political. We have so many contexts. Right now, we've talked about the political and historic context for 2015 and for 2020, because understanding those helps us understand what Lou's talking about. You'll be joining that conversation in some way to answer the question, how are we American? What is America? What America should stand for? What values does it represent? How do we better represent those values? So there's a lot of ways to approach this research paper. That is one required essay type. The second required essay type is to use one text or one claim as a lens for understanding another text or another claim in order to bring new understanding. You're going to be doing both of these things as you ask that question, what is America? That's the department goal. The class goal, the way we're approaching that is you're going to be choosing a topic that allows you to examine ongoing conversations about the identity of America and Americans addressed by the Aspen Institute, considering the contexts in which early texts were produced. And then you're going to join that conversation by building an argument that reflects our current context. So I've introduced a video from the Aspen Institute, and Eric Liu wrote the article that you're reading right now. But they approach this question of what is America from multiple vantage points, examining multiple topics. You will get to choose a topic. As a class, we're going to decide which topics we want our research to focus on, and then you will join a group that focuses on that topic. So let's say you wanted to focus on democracy or civil rights or argumentation or American values, or even this list of what Americans should know. You would join a group. And then as a group, you would do research. You're going to do your research and compile an annotated bibliography, possible sources you could use to approach that topic. You'll be doing your research as a group, and this will be the group that is your peer reading group for this paper. But you are writing your own paper. Does that make sense? That's the goal of the groups, to support each other, to do research together, to give feedback to each other as you each write your own papers. Your audience is students and professors. And as we think about that audience, we will come together and we will work together to establish audience assumptions, just as we did for the first essay that you wrote. This paper is going to be considerably longer than your papers. It's going to be 1750 words, not including your heading, not including your title, and not including your works cited page. So yeah, it's going to be a little longer than things you may have been writing. The research requirements, you're going to review a series of papers and videos produced by the Aspen Institute, and you're going to choose one that interests you in order to join the conversation by examining more recent sources that might illustrate, clarify, extend, or complicate that. You're going to use your starting text or video from the Aspen Institute, and you're going to add at least 6 additional sources, at least 3 of which must be research articles published in a scholarly journal. So this is going to require research, and it's going to require that you read, decipher, analyze difficult texts. All of your sources have to be credible and add to your discussion of significance of your issues. Some are going to help you build your argument, and some will. So essentially, you are building an argument. The next week, we're going to continue reading, discussing Liu, discussing another text, and then I'm going to ask you to look at a variety of texts from the Aspen Institute, and you can focus on one or more of these in the discussion board. But then we'll come back together week 10, and we'll choose groups, we'll choose topics, you'll divide up, and we will go to the library, and you'll have some training in doing research and accessing online sources through the library. the library is an extraordinary resource with ebooks and with periodicals that you can access online. Questions about the basics of this essay? Make sure that you read the prompt very carefully. Here's some background information. Here are the parameters for your group work. Here's your essay structure. And here's information about the sources that you'll be using. Other questions? Well, then that really is all I have right now. Keep in mind your reading journal is due this evening, and the discussion board based on Eric Liu is due tomorrow night. Your initial post. Make sure that you, the link for Eric Liu's reading journal will stay open until tomorrow evening, but after that I won't accept it unless you have extenuating circumstances, and you should contact me early in order to talk about that so that we can negotiate an alternate due date, but otherwise it is due tomorrow evening. You also have, and I wish more of you had read this, although we alluded to this idea, you're going to be writing 2 paragraphs about underlying assumptions for Eric Liu's audience. What does he assume they believe? What values does he assume that they hold? And you can go back in our discussions of underlying assumptions previously, and there's some information in a sample paragraph on that assignment link. Any questions? All right, then that's all I've got. And you are free to go have a fabulous weekend. Leica, have fun in Texas.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm. Rebecca, are you here?